evening air at Fairmont Crest was heavy with the kind of anticipation that seemed to ripple through its ancient walls. Our channel returns once again to deliver an unflinching dive into the newest episode of Beyond the Gates, airing August 12. Tonight's events are set against the sprawling estate where power and secrecy share the same corridors, and every step, every glance, feels sharpened by hidden agendas. For those who follow the tangled threads of this saga, what unfolds will not simply be a story, it will be a fracture, a shift that forces every character into dangerous new terrain. The scene began with Samantha moving quietly through the main hall, her heels clicking softly against polished marble, each sound echoing faintly beneath the vaulted ceilings. Her expression carried the serene composure of a hostess, but beneath it was calculation, deliberate and sharp. She had arranged this evening with care, not as a celebration but as a test. A mechanism to manipulate old wounds into new opportunities. The bait was a lie, crafted to bypass years of tension. Martin, she had claimed to Smitty, was gravely ill. The intention was not kindness but control, a way to lure two men bound by shared history and divided by unspoken grievances into the same room, where emotions could be steered like currents under a shifting tide. The dining room was a portrait of quiet opulence. Long white candles flickered along a polished table, their light catching the glint of crystal and silver. Every plate was placed with military precision, every garnish aligned, every chair angled as though the seating itself carried meaning. Martin arrived first, his posture rigid, his eyes scanning the arrangement like a battlefield, reading the lines and anticipating the ambush. His mind catalogued the details, the symmetry of the place settings, the absence of casual clutter, and found in them confirmation that this night was not as simple as it appeared. Smitty entered moments later, his gaze steady but cold, the years between them hanging like a dense fog neither man was willing to part. Samantha received them both with a smoothness that concealed the tension in her shoulders, guiding them to their seats with the precision of someone moving chess pieces toward an inevitable confrontation. The first courses were served. Delicate arrangements of food whose flavors barely registered beneath the weight of the silence. Martin cut his meat with mechanical care, his eyes never quite meeting Smitty's. While Smitty's hands stayed still longer than they moved, his mind turning over thoughts not yet ready to surface. Samantha's eyes moved between them, monitoring the subtle cues, the shifts in breathing, the narrowing of eyes, the pauses that spoke volumes. Just as she was about to press forward with her intended script for the evening, the sound of the front door opening broke the fragile balance. Jacob entered without hesitation, his arrival as abrupt as a gust of cold air in a warm room. He carried no invitation, only purpose. And in his hand was a leather folder worn along the edges, the clasp catching the light in a fleeting glint. His steps toward the table were measured but unyielding, his presence bending the atmosphere into something tighter, sharper. Without ceremony, he placed the folder down among the untouched glasses and pulled it open, releasing the faint scent of paper that had traveled far and passed through many hands. Within lay photographs and reports arranged with meticulous care, the kind of evidence that left no room for ambiguity. Jacob's revelation was not a performance, it was a rupture. The case that had gripped the community for months, haunting conversations and festering in rumor, had been broken open. The perpetrator was not a shadowy outsider nor a name whispered in speculative gossip, but someone who had stood beside them all along, a figure trusted and welcomed, now unmasked as the source of the very crime that had shaken them. The weight of the truth fell like a stone into the center of the table. Samantha's hands stilled, her plans collapsing in on themselves. Martin leaned back, his eyes narrowing toward Smitty with a suspicion that seemed to bloom fully formed, dredging up old doubts and bending them into something darker. The air seemed to contract, as though the room itself was holding its breath. While the dining room was thick with unspoken accusations, elsewhere in the estate, another thread was unraveling. Leslie sat alone in a dim upstairs room, the only light a narrow beam spilling from a desk lamp onto a neat stack of envelopes. They had arrived over the past weeks, each one a small disruption she had tucked away without opening. But tonight, curiosity and unease had finally outweighed hesitation. The paper tore softly beneath her fingers, and from within the latest envelope she drew a photograph, its edges softened with age, the colors faded to a palette of sepia and ghostly blue. It showed a young girl, Her expression both open and guarded, a face that seemed to hold secrets too large for its years. Under the photograph was a folded sheet of fine stationery. The ink just slightly smudged as if written in haste or under strain. Leslie unfolded it and immediately recognized the handwriting, Barbara's, precise yet carrying the faint tremor of emotion. The words were brief, but their meaning stretched deep into the past. They spoke of Eva, but not the Eva the world knew. They described origins that had been obscured, ties that had been cut deliberately, and truths that had been replaced with carefully curated falsehoods. The photograph, the letters, they were not merely mementos, but keys to a part of Eva's identity that had been kept locked away, perhaps for reasons darker than protection. Leslie's pulse quickened as she set the letter down, the edges of her reality shifting with the weight of the new knowledge. She felt the air in the room grow colder, as though the past itself had slipped through the cracks in the walls to stand beside her. Downstairs, Jacob's revelation continued to pull invisible wires, setting off silent alarms in the minds of those present. Upstairs, the photograph burned itself into Leslie's thoughts, each detail now charged with significance. Fairmont Crest had always been a place where appearances held power, where silence was often the most dangerous form of communication. But on this night, the silences were not empty, they were heavy with accusation, with the beginnings of choices that would reshape alliances and expose fractures long hidden. The candles in the dining room burned lower, their flames bending in the faint drafts that moved through the hallways. Shadows lengthened along the walls, carrying with them the knowledge that these revelations were not isolated events, but signals of something larger, something closing in. As the episode draws to its uneasy conclusion, the estate remains suspended in a state between calm and collapse. Every character leaves the night altered, their paths now bound to secrets that will not stay buried. The truth has been set in motion, and its trajectory promises to cut deep into the lives of those who once believed they understood each other. Stay with us as we follow every twist, every fracture, every unmasking that lies ahead and beyond the gates. For the full unraveling of what began on August 12th, follow our journey and subscribe, because the gates are opening wider. And what comes through next will change everything.